Charles Jagusah was in an ATV accident. So let's stop right here for just a moment. Thank God he's okay. Because after what we saw this weekend in Texas, twice with the fireworks and the flooding, I mean, the only thing that really matters in what was a horrible kind of weekend overall, thank God that he's okay. However, he did break his arm. He did have to have surgery. I can't say the humerus bone or whatever it is that he has to have surgery on. Joe, I did contact a buddy of mine, Dr. John Sibley Butler, who does listen to the show. I asked him how long did this injury would take from a recovery standpoint. He said, Joe, he told me, Blake, it could be anywhere between 6 to 12 weeks. So he could be before the season or maybe week 2 at maybe the latest that Charles Jagusah could return here per a doctor. We are not doctors, but I did ask around. I did ask a couple of people. Your thoughts, though, on Jagasaw?
So one, obviously, just to reiterate, as you said, wishing him a speedy recovery. It sounds like they're optimistic that he's going to be ready for the start of the season, but that doesn't exactly help Notre Dame's circumstance because he's probably going to miss most of fall camp. So you're not going to have him to get ready for the start of the year after he missed basically all of last year until he joined the team and played in the college football playoff run that they had. Until the Orange Bowl was when he stepped on the field for the Fighting Irish. So very promising kid, super inexperienced, about to lose out on another opportunity to get better because he's going to be healing with this bone injury. Before I talk about the implications on the roster really quick, I'm not trying to like call him out or like be super aggressively negative towards Jagasaw. Mm-hmm. Funny enough, my dad like just texted me like 2 minutes before the show started the headline, and it was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, you got to be smarter than that. And I agree with him. If you're a big offensive lineman, you can't be doing the ATVs and stuff during the offseason. You just can't. It is a recipe for disaster. I have so many, not like a large number, but I know of people that are linemen that are big dudes that fall off of these things. It is hard to maintain your balance on an ATV. So I'm not trying to call them dumb or anything, but like it's frustrating when you see a headline like this because it was incredibly avoidable. To talk about the implications, though, Notre Dame during the offseason, a lot of people tried to point and say they're screwed. Look at all the guys that just left that were starters for the Notre Dame offensive line during the college football playoff. Those who pay attention to Notre Dame, follow Notre Dame, cover Notre Dame, know the guys that they lost weren't going to start this upcoming year. They were better off going somewhere else. That news at the time didn't hurt anything. It didn't, because there was hope that Anthony Mapp, Charles Jagusah, and Emil Wagner were going to step up and we're going to do great stuff. But now with this headline, it is a problem because now they don't have that same level of veteran depth that they had last year that they were able to rely on that got those guys into the lineup. So, Blake, I'm not sounding the alarm. I'm not saying Notre Dame is screwed. I think that would be a little too reactionary. But after losing all these guys in the portal, you can't lose one of your most promising guys to an avoidable injury. It's just tough, and it could be something that hurts them in week 1 against Miami.
Do you remember the conversation when I asked you about Coogan leaving and all these different things? Portal is not a situation where you need to start losing linemen. Mm-mm. We've had this conversation.
Yeah.
In reference to the second part of what you just said about depth, I don't mean this in a wrong way. I'm not saying that you would have beaten Ohio State a year ago. Joe, what if you would have been healthy? What if you would have been healthy?
I don't know. I don't know if that was like the main factor for me.
I'm with you. I'm just saying you don't know. You go into a season again with this young man being hurt, and you brought up an interesting situation. I'm not by any means calling out Marcus Freeman with this. I do believe when you start letting guys go, okay, and it's unfortunate that you have to let some of these guys go. Joe, that's a position group where guys get hurt on the field, much less Jagasaw doing it to himself. Right? Like we see a position where if you're not recruiting there and at a great level, that it can become an issue. Here's the thing. They have recruited at a great issue, at a great.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But you find yourself back in the same position that you were in a season ago in reference to depth. It worked for you last year. What I would say is, just because it worked for you once doesn't mean that it always will work. Now, in reference to my thoughts on Jagasaw,
okay,
Joe, I know people are projecting that he will come back in week 2. Joe, I still don't know. Even if it's a 12-week recovery and he's cleared, you got to get up to game speed. You got to get up to game condition. That doesn't mean that he won't be hit there by week 4, week 5. Week 2 is a little bit early for me.
I don't.
Every down, every situation type of down in, down out situation.
Yeah.
It sucks. Here's the thing. 4th of July weekend and you're on an ATV normally means drinking. I'm not trying to assume.
Yeah, I don't want to jump to that. I don't want to jump
That's not okay. Completely fine. He's got to make better decisions.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that part.
That I don't know if he was drinking or wasn't drinking, but let's just be like, what do people do? You would assume that those types of situations happen. I have no clue if he did. In reference to depth, Joe, in reference to a starting position, here's the last thing for me. It's one thing when you had Riley Leonard a season ago who could get away from pressure and has been there and started before. You start having offensive line issues and injuries for a guy that you don't know who's going to be the starter at the current moment, starts taking injuries up front and the game's a little too fast for him early. That's when shit starts hurting you. You have a very front-loaded schedule that is difficult. The one position group you don't need to be losing people is offensive line. Does this, and I would ask you this, does this injury affect you how you look in the beginning of the season for them?
So to kind of like clarify off of my thought in line with that question, I'm bringing up the depth stuff, not saying that Notre Dame doesn't have quality guys in their depth of their offensive line. The problem is that they don't have tremendous experience. They've got a lot of young guys. Sullivan,
you didn't have it last year, though, Joe, and that's going to be the Notre Dame fan base's argument. Is like, look, you didn't have.
Well, no, but they kind of did. They kind of did though, because they were afforded the opportunity to bench a couple of upperclassmen that stepped in when injuries occurred, and that was why Notre Dame had a high floor on their offensive line.
Reps, though. Those guys weren't getting massive game reps; they just got beat out.
Sure. Sullivan Absher is projected to start. From my understanding, he makes the most sense as the next guy to step up. He's listed as the backup left guard on our lads, but I believe he's like the swing backup guard. The positive way that I'd spin this is we were talking when Jagasaw went down with the pec injury.
Yeah.
Last year, we talked about how Anthony Knapp, who was a young guy who wasn't even supposed to start at the time last year. It was expected to be, I'm blanking on who it was supposed to be, but it was supposed to be an upperclassman. Anthony Knapp steps in. We were worried about how he was going to do against Scourton and Stewart and the whole Texas A&M defensive line.
Hung on well.
Well, he hung on well, and then he had a great season until like a couple shaky games, but still was tremendous throughout last year. So my positive spin on this is that Notre Dame's well recruited enough that when they've stepped into these situations, they've had a young guy that has proven everybody wrong. All I'll say is if Jagasaw, is coming back, and whoever, if it is Sullivan and he's playing great, don't be surprised if he doesn't get back into the lineup. Like, this is where this gets into play, where if it is week 4, week 5, why would you disrupt the chemistry of the O-line?
Because if he's that talented, you throw him back in there. If he is who you think he is, right?
Well, they didn't bring him back in until the Orange Bowl last year
when they needed him. When shit got real.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I don't mean that, Joe. When shit got real with Penn State, that's when he goes back in.
Yeah.
When shit gets real, okay, we'll listen to me. In reference to offensive line play, I'm not going to steer you wrong here. Chemistry is the backbone of the 5 of you. Always has been, always will be. But Joe, when you got a dude, like a dude, sometimes you realize that even though they haven't been there, that chemistry starts getting a lot better than what you had it before. I'll give you an example. We had an injury at left guard in week 4, and we had a true freshman dog. Joe, we were a better offensive line. Like, I think the average of the 3 weeks that year at Southeastern was probably, I think we were like running in an air raid offense, like 190 a game. We were mauling dudes, okay? I would just tell you this in reference to him. If he's the dude that you think that he is, I don't worry about the chemistry. You do throw him in when shit gets real. I get what you're saying, though. Work him into it. Let him have a drive. Let him have 2 drives. See how it goes before you start him. It's kind of what they did last year, too, at the end of this. If he's who you think he is, then fine. You brought up one thing that I would just counteract. This has nothing to do with Notre Dame. This has to do with every team around the country. Freshmen coming in and starting, or young underclassmen coming in and starting with no experience and just being thrown into the role and not winning that role, them holding up is the exception, not the rule. How many times in college football have we seen younger guys because of injuries have to come in and they struggle? Nap is the exception to the rule. You could be the exception to the rule again if you're Notre Dame. I'm not saying that you can't be and that you won't be.
So,
However, you are going up against some pretty gnarly offensive lines with a quarterback that you do not know when you knew Riley Leonard would run. You knew Riley Leonard would take off. You didn't have the problem with that, and you had the experience. Again, I'm going to preach this until the crows come home. When you have a young quarterback and it's 3rd and 7, Joe, what do? You don't know that right now. Okay, let's not act as if that this isn't just a Notre Dame thing. This is just a general take from me in general, right? Like this is they can accomplish that the way that they did. Look, post Northern Illinois a season ago, okay, and not making fun of them, Joe, they figured shit out. They got to a national championship because they started figuring shit out quickly. My point is that you can still be the exception to the rule. But if there's a worry that you need to have, young quarterback, injuries along the offensive line, that starts bringing its disaster and some issues in close games.
So just the one thing I wanted to also additionally clarify, Sullivan Absher is a redshirt sophomore. So like this isn't a guy who would be stepping in that is a true freshman like the Anthony Knapp circumstance. Somebody pointed out it was Tosh Baker, by the way, that I was referring to earlier. I see somebody, Justin Kane, here in the chat brought up, like that was one of the thoughts in the back of my head was like Will Black, former 5-star, who's a true freshman, supposed to be a tackle, but Jagasaw was also supposed to be a tackle. The thing that I'm thinking in my head is, if there is that one, well, I'm sure that they're going to consider it, but if there is like a random wild card and Will Black just randomly looks great, that would create the circumstance that we're here talking about is like, this was a really gifted recruit coming in. Maybe they do start him just because he looks promising and they kind of want to see what they can get out of him the first couple games instead of going with a known commodity and a player that's been around the program for 3 years. And if Black starts to play as good as Knapp did as a true freshman, that is where Jagasaw gets bumped.
Well, or you might move someone down and let him stay at the tackle position and see how he holds up.
I don't know what they do. I agree with you that the chemistry thing is important. It made me also think of like another example from when I was playing. I was not an offensive lineman in college, but we had at Rhode Island, we had my freshman year, we had this very talented redshirt freshman center and a redshirt senior at center. Goes down one game with a concussion. The young guy stepped in, never let the job go for 4 more years. And that guy graduated and walked on senior day, but never played again. It's the same shit. You never want to disrupt chemistry if just because a guy is young. You don't.
No. Well, and again, talent, it's a weird thing about one guy being inserted versus 2, 3, 4, whatever the situation is. That's when chemistry's out the window. You don't have chemistry. Yeah. Joe, the guy, I ate, slept, did study hall, and breathed with the same 5 guys every day. You know, brother, you could have your eyes closed, hear one of them fart in the middle of a study hall, and know exactly what one it is because you know the way they fart. I mean, it's just the God's honest truth.
If I went and asked Sean that question, he'd probably agree that that's true.
Listen, I know it sounds stupid. I am telling you, Joe.
No, I know you linemen are different. I know you guys are different.
You wake up, you got film from 5 to 6, 6:30, whatever it is. You go
but
and
it's
work
unlike any other position group, though, is the point.
Right, but it's different here because you got 5 of you that's on the field. No other position has more players on the field other than you. Nobody.
Right.